Welcome to My Type of Shit. I'm your host, Emily, and this is.
Mech here.
Yeah. So if you guys are long-term or long-time listeners, we've been doing this. Well, we did this podcast back in 2019, but we are starting it back again. I attempted to start it back like a year ago, and we just decided that now's the time to actually restart it.
Yeah, it's the remaster.
Yeah, so just a little background. I guess we went through all the 16 types. Um
Those are all still up in a
yeah,
podcast on this channel. Or not in a podcast, in a playlist on this channel that you can reference. And honestly,
yeah.
they didn't age. They haven't aged that poorly. But do you want to talk a little bit about has any over these years has your understanding of typology, socionics, enneagram, has any of that developed, do you feel, since we originally did the podcast?
Yeah, I think so I don't really do a lot of Myers-Briggs anymore, and actually at the time when even before that I was doing like videos, but
Hmm.
I was more into socionics. I've been into socionics since I was like 19. And I would say that always develops because it's always like a running thing. You're always learning and stuff. And just like meeting people and like having different life experiences, I feel like I definitely developed a lot
So you were
through
always
that.
into socionics, but in 2019 when we did the original podcast and we did it on MBTI, you were making mostly MBTI content on your YouTube.
Yeah, because at the time when I first started doing YouTube, I started doing YouTube in 2018. There wasn't a ton of Myers-Briggs content out there, which is crazy to think now, but,
Yeah, there
at the
wasn't.
time yeah, there wasn't, or at least not, like, informative stuff, and so I was like, I had the idea that I would start with Myers-Briggs and then transition into Socionics, but, just like anybody that has NI can relate to this, like, I feel like in my head, I see what the vision is, and I think for other people, it might seem like very slow to get to that point,
Yeah,
but I'm not, like, thinking it that way.
we made that podcast pre-algorithm YouTube. And since then a
Yeah.
lot has changed with YouTube. MBTI kind of blew up in general
Yep.
because of the algorithm, and it's quite popular on the YouTube Shorts as well. But Socionics I feel is still not that big. And if you want anyone who like sits in front of a webcam like how YouTube used to be, because if you go far enough back in YouTube history, it was basically just people sitting in front of webcams breaking things down. If you want that kind of content, you basically have to go to Socionics now, because MBTI is it's more infotainment. It's
Yeah.
people have turned it more into like it's more watered down in a way than I think it used to be. At least the discussion.
Well, and, so for those of you guys, I shot 2 episodes, and we're gonna archive those episodes, for this podcast, but I went into the history, and we're going to go back into the history, like, that's our plan to go back into stuff, on here as well,
Hmm.
but, yeah, like, when I did that, um, there isn't a lot on socionics, and Myers-Briggs was not intended to be super deep. The way that it was actually even developed was just a watered down version of Carl Jung's psychological types. And it was meant for more business and like educational settings. And it's more about like, in my opinion, like more about appearances, like how you appear to others rather than your actual dynamics and who you are. So in that respect, I think socionics is a lot not even just a thought like me thinking this, it is a lot more in depth. It's definitely harder to digest for newcomers, but I think once you get into it, it's like, wow, everything makes sense, I guess.
For people who may be a little bit more intimidated with Socionics. Can you talk a little bit about what is different about it and what isn't? Because there is a lot of overlap with MBTI, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, so
What are the main
just
ways
like
it's different? I guess is the good.
I would say like they do the biggest I would say the number one difference that people see in the beginning is in MBTI they focus on the four cognitive functions. So like for you as an INTJ, it would be like you lead with NI and then TE and then FI, SE.
Hmm.
That would be like your function stack. Whereas in Socionics, it goes through like all eight of the functions. So like in Socionics, you have all eight of the functions.
Hmm.
Um, and depending on where they're placed for your personality, it can really change. I mean, it just basically interacts with other personalities. Like Socionics is really big on relational dynamics. Whereas like Myers-Briggs is kind of like a standalone thing. Again, it's like meant for if you're in the like a I don't know, you're doing a job and like for a job you're like going to be placed into different groups. They're very focused on oh like feelers, thinkers, things like that. That's how like
Yeah,
a
let's
lot
put the
of
feelers with the feelers, the thinkers with the
yeah,
thinkers.
or intuitives with intuitives or sensors with sensors. Whereas in Socionics, it's based on other things, particularly the quadras. The quadras is like a huge thing in Socionics. So
Yes.
there's alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and they all have their own like ecosystem.
Hmm.
And there's four personalities in each of the quadras, and they interact with each other in a specific way. Like the cool thing about Socionics, every personality has a relation with each other. So like there's so many different relations, and some of them are symmetrical relations and some of them are asymmetrical, where the kind of the power is like shifted or unbalanced.
Hmm.
So it's really interesting in that way. And I mean there's a lot more, but that's like kind of the big things is the idea that Socionics uses quadras, it's more relationship driven. And it's also more scientific. Like there's different equations that are involved in the way that socionics relations interact.
Hmm.
Um, Also, socionics was created in Lithuania, and Myers-Briggs was created in the U.S. So,
Can you talk a little bit about the different models to Socionics for those who may not know about it?
um, I don't know all of the models, but the main ones that I know are Model A and Model G. And Model A is like the when you're getting into socionics, that's like I guess the first model to go over,
Hmm.
and the way that it like actually the functions fall. I don't want to like misspeak about Model G or even just like the differences, but I personally, and I think that most people that are getting into socionics want to follow Model A, because that's like more pure socionics. But in the future, we can talk more about Model G
I don't think
too.
when people get into Socionics they even really know that there are different models. And so some
Yeah.
end up falling right into G without even knowing it.
Well, I mean, they wouldn't probably fall into G unless they were directed. Like, I know the book that I recommended you by Victor Glinko is because Victor Glinko created Model G. That is a little bit deceiving, I guess, because that's Model G, but most stuff that you look up online is going to be Model A
Okay, okay.
in general.
So most Socionics discussion dating back to the 2000s, that's all Model A.
Yeah, that's online, yeah. And then and Socionics was created in like the 70s.
Hmm.
So Model A's been around since then, but It's a lot more popular in Eastern Europe, so there's probably I mean, I don't know how many models there are, but that's it's a little bit more popular there, so they get more into the weeds on that.
Yeah. So if Victor Glinko is the founder of Model G, would you say he made that in 2019, or what year do you think he was developing that?
Um, I I don't know what the date is, but it was before 2019.
I see, I see.
It's
Even though
been a
that book
while.
came out in 2019,
Yeah, he released that book.
but he was
Um,
working on it for
no,
probably
he's
years.
been yeah, I don't know how long, but I would assume quite a bit longer
I see,
than
I
that.
see. So, do you want to talk a little bit about your YouTube, where our YouTubes have been since the podcast? Any MBTI content that you've made since 2019 or socionic stuff?
We can, but I also would like to hear from you as well.
Yeah.
So, do you want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I'll make this as quick as possible, I guess. So I started my channel in 2018, and my intention was not actually to make it MBTI. It was just supposed to be general. Like my first videos that I released were kind of just conversational about like I don't know topics like ghosting or unrequited love or things like that. And that's kind of what I intended the channel to be. But then I talked about like Myers-Briggs and I noticed that people were interested in that and I was super interested in personality theory. So I decided to kind of talk about Myers-Briggs first and then eventually talk about socionics. Um, my channel started picking up traction at the time and it was I don't know, I think I was, like, in a different spot in life in general. I was pretty lonely in a lot of ways. Even though I had friends and stuff, I just was kind of in a weird spot in life. I started the channel when I was 24, and I feel like I've changed so much. But in that time, um, I kept on making content about Myers-Briggs. I made mostly instructional or, like, educational stuff. I also did stuff in like, I would do a lot of videos in my car, just doing, like, one-off videos or one-shot videos.
Those were the good ones.
Yeah, I see that, like, I see that people liked those, but I just felt like I don't know. I think I get kind of weird or I get kinda cringe
Mm.
the feeling of cringe when I look back on
Yeah. Well, I feel the
that.
same way about my content. My content, basically, if you go to any year and then go back 2 years, I'll basically be saying the opposite of what I was saying before. And I was also saying it in some passionate way with a lot of logic behind it. So I'm just a rapidly changing organism. Like, in some sense, the things that I say, even though I say them with a lot of passion, it's like you shouldn't take it that seriously because I'm prone to change. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
honestly, I feel that it's kind of probably the same way with you, or really any world model based person, which is DNI users. They're very world model based people. And when the world model shifts, so do the rest of the ideas, that they think about. So that's sort of what it is.
Yeah. I
Um,
agree with that for sure.
so yeah, these days I'm mostly just streaming. I mean, I don't really release that many videos, honestly. But I stream on my channel every other week. That's pretty much all I do. I never moved to TikTok. I know you went to TikTok. Can you talk a
Yeah,
little bit about your
so
TikTok journey for me? Because I never really followed you over there. But I was aware that you had some very viral content over there. And I mean, I don't even really know everything about it or what it was like. But I know you were very early into the TikTok scene. And you were telling me, like, yeah, I think this is really like a new wave. And you were definitely right about that.
yeah, I feel like I wasn't that early, but I guess I was in the sense that I mean, as far as, like, people that were not like teenagers or whatever. I started my TikTok when a lot of people did back in 2020 during the beginning of the pandemic. And it was March 2020 that I started it, and within a week or two, I was just like posting kind of random videos, and then I posted a psychological experiment that I learned when I was 15. And I actually posted about this on my YouTube channel as well, but I didn't think it was gonna be anything crazy. But then the next day I had like over 2 million views,
Yeah.
which was pretty crazy for me. And then I kind of like released more psychological experiments, and they also did really well. And I also did like I started doing some personality theory stuff.
People were eating
And
that up.
yeah, and like actually within, I don't know how long it was, but it was less than a year. I got like 50,000 followers on TikTok,
Yeah.
which now like when you go viral, you could easily get that sooner than that, but
Mhm.
especially for the content I was making, it was pretty crazy. And I've just kind of like stayed there because I don't post content, but I love TikTok. Um like I'm not personally posting stuff right now. I do have the intention of doing stuff in the future,
Mhm.
but I love it as a platform, and I think it's the best social media platform
Yeah.
out there right now.
So you're a big fan of short form content
Um,
in general,
a lot
because
of
that's really what it is completely based on. Is you know.
y yeah, and, in some ways, but, more than anything, like, I don't really watch TikTok for the short form content, like the super short form. I watch, like, the 3 to 10-minute videos.
Yeah.
Um, I watch a lot of stuff about, like, all different topics. That's what's really cool. I know that, like, it's kinda creepy, but, like, if you spend some time on TikTok, you can get your For You page to be very, like, aligned with what you like.
Yeah. The post algorithm internet, you can get very refined content on just about any
Yes.
platform these days. But
Yeah.
yeah, but that you can't lie that the TikTok content is a lot different in nature than like a podcast like this. Where people sit
Yeah,
down
if
and really listen to like really long episodes and in-depth topics, which is what we're really trying to do here is, we're trying to break down a lot of typology concepts and stuff like that, but in a long form way, and you can't really get that on TikTok. So it's like you kind of like the short form stuff and the long form in a way.
yeah, I mean, you can break it down into smaller forms. I guess that's kind of like YouTube videos in general, like, how they were in the beginning. Um But yeah, you would have to take it piece by piece. But a lot of people will use TikTok as a way to just engage with people.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I would say most people will follow, like cross follow on platforms.
Hmm.
But yeah, if someone's really interested in a topic, they definitely would be like podcasts in general are kind of blowing up. They've been blowing up for a while. And I think people just, if they're interested in a topic, they will take the time to go listen to a
I think so too.
podcast.
And I think
So,
what I want us to provide here is some really in-depth discussion on pretty much everything socionics, not just the types, but also the quadrants, also some Enneagram. Maybe we'll touch back to MBTI, but anything basically personality based. Actually, there's some other stuff too we could touch on later on, but and then we can also have guests on too, I think.
yeah, I personally think, and this was our intention in the very beginning, like back in 2019 when we started this podcast, we intended to go through all of the types. And then we talked about going through the functions, which I think was such a good idea.
Hmm.
And then also just having guests on and stuff. And I just think, and in that format, it can pretty much be unlimited
Yeah,
conversations.
it is what we make
Um,
it.
yep.
But I definitely hope the people are willing to listen to socionics content. Leave a comment below if socionics is your thing or if you prefer MBTI to socionics, which one you prefer. I know, Emily, you seem to think that everyone who gets into MBTI first just later on wishes they would have started with socionics. I don't know if I have that same view. I think I'm kind of glad I started with MBTI and then moved to socionics because I think MBTI is just more digestible for a beginner. But at the same
Well,
time, I get what you mean. Why it may just be like, well, if I had just started with socionics, I wouldn't have regretted that either.
I don't so it's not that I don't think that people should get into Myers-Briggs first. That's actually, I mean, obviously, I did my channel in such a way back in the day that, like, I realized that Myers-Briggs is a lot more digestible, and it's so much more common in the US. Like, you won't I think socionics is definitely becoming more popular here, but it's a slower thing just because it's not as easy to understand in general, and, like, a lot of people have not heard about it. Um, but I think, I think that people can get into Myers-Briggs, and I think it actually, like, but what I'm saying is most people are going to get into Myers-Briggs, but I would say you don't need to be, like, so deep into Myers-Briggs because at the end of the day, Myers-Briggs is not that deep,
Mm.
and in fact, I would say a lot of people online, including myself, have made it deeper than it was intended to be, um, and I think if you like, realize that and then get into socionics. The only problem about doing Myers-Briggs before socionics is I think if you're typed correctly in socionics, you can go over to Myers-Briggs, but if you're typed, like, in Myers-Briggs first, there is such a high likelihood that you are going to be mistyped.
Uh,
So many people that I meet are mistyped, and then they tried doing socionics, and it just does not work.
so
Um,
there's an incessant amount of mistypings in general when it comes to
yeah,
MBTI. My
yeah.
question is, does that same phenomenon exist in the socionics community?
It's a lot harder, so it doesn't work as much, to be mistyped in socionics, and that's something I really like, because if you're mistyped, the only way that, like, I guess someone could be deceived is if they are mistyped and then they mistype the people around them, or, like, the people around them are also mistyped, and then they think that their relations with people are going to be like, they're basing it off of a mistyping. That is one thing, but if you are mistyped in socionics and at least a few people in your life are typed correctly in socionics, when you do, like, the type relations and you try to be like, "Oh, is this my dual or is this my, conflictor or, like, identical," or whatever you wanna say, it's going to fall apart because it's not gonna make sense.
I
So it's
see.
almost like a puzzle, like, if the puzzle is not quite fitting, then you're either mistyped or someone that you're, like, interacting with is mistyped, probably.
Yeah, that's really well said. Um, so because it's relational,
Yes.
your whole ecosystem has to be broken
Yeah.
for you to really remain mistyped over time. If you're actually taking the theory seriously, genuinely looking into it, there's no actual way someone could remain mistyped over an extended period of time, whereas MBTI doesn't have that kind of built-in mechanism. You can easily
Yes,
just think you're
exactly.
something, and the way that you interact with other people, you can continue to convince yourself that you're that thing.
Yeah, you'll be like, "Oh, I'm an ENFP, why am I not like, I was told I was supposed to get along with this type, but, like, why am I not getting along with it?" Like, you might have that kind of thought, because there's also just, like, it's kind of frustrating in a way. But I get it. In Myers-Briggs, there's so many, like, odd pairings and, like, "This is who your perfect match is," and, like, all of that stuff that is just, like, so not, like, in reality, not right.
That's
Um,
funny.
but, I mean, if you're mistyped and you're matching with someone, then, I mean, maybe you're actually a better match because if you think you're, like, I don't know, let me just say one, if you're an ESTP and you're trying to type or trying to be with like an INFP in Myers-Briggs. That is a conflictor relation in socionics if you think about the cognitive functions,
Hmm.
because in socionics, the INFP would be an INFJ. Um, like because in socionics they go by the first function, so all of the introverts are flipped, as in the P and the J are flipped. So like for us, you and me, Shaun, like we're both gonna be like perceivers
Hmm.
in socionics because our first function, introverted intuition, is a perceiving function. So, anyways, with the ESTP and the like INFP and Myers-Briggs, they're gonna like if they're like, oh yeah, we're a good match. It's like, no, actually you guys are conflictors and that's not a good match at all. Like that might work for a little while. You might like admire them for a moment, but it's gonna be a very volatile relationship.
Yeah. So all those compatibility charts in MBTI, are they pulling those out of their ass or what?
Um, I don't think so. Like, I don't think everybody's pulling it out of their ass, but I am thinking like they're just kind of looking at it on the surface. They're like, all of the intuitives are good
Yeah.
with each other.
Yeah.
Like that is just like a plain that is just so frustrating because um just because someone's intuitive, their function stack can be completely different than like another intuitive to a point that they're probably gonna not really like each other.
Ooh, I have a
Um,
really good question right now.
okay, what is it?
Does socionics fix the S is for stupid problem?
Yes.
And why is that? What does it do differently to actually fix that?
So in Myers-Briggs, if you like anybody that's into Myers-Briggs will know this, there's definitely an intuitive bias.
Big time.
Yeah, like people will type like if you're interested in Myers-Briggs, there's a high likelihood that you're going to type as an intuitive and you're going to be like, "Oh, I'm so intuitive," but you very well could be a sensor. And there's just like a stereotype that sensors in Myers-Briggs are kind of like S is for stupid, and I actually made a video about this. But it's it's one of the biggest, I don't know, like myths and lies that
It's
people like when they're getting into Myers-Briggs like think. And the way that it's like different in socionics. In socionics, there are no types that are put on a platform. Like there's no types that are like idolized. Like in Myers-Briggs, a lot of people idealize or they used to like INFJs or whatever, or even INTJs. Like you're not gonna be on this like pedestal.
yeah.
In socionics, all of the personalities are like basically like they're all capable of bad. Um and they're also like they all have flaws, but they all have strengths. So socionics is not a way to like make you feel good about your personality. It's just the reality of who you are. And each personality has like unique strengths and weaknesses. And some of the most quote unquote intuitive people that I've met, if we're just thinking from a very like shallow, like a not shallow, but like the kind of perspective that I think a lot of people think of in Myers-Briggs are actually sensors. Like
Mm,
there are some really intelligent people in every personality type.
yeah.
And there's also stupid people in every personality type. It's I don't know, it's just like very frustrating, but yeah, socionics does not like put intuitives on a pedestal and it also doesn't demonize sensors.
There's just a big cope in the MBTI community that oh, S isn't for stupid, and like they regurgitate it to themselves, even though it's very clear that there is this implicit intuitive bias. And no matter how much you repeat it to yourselves, there still is this intuitive bias. That's why there's so many mistypes. That's why there's
Yeah,
so many
because
mistypes.
they don't want to be a censor.
Of
Because
course.
they want to yeah, and also yeah, it's like I think if people get past that and actually realize that everybody is I don't know. like everybody is capable, like as in all personalities are capable of pretty much anything. Um, I mean, within reason, like they have their own strengths and weaknesses, but like there's not like an ideal type to be, I guess. And
Yeah.
it's all situational and it also has to deal with like your personality and how you interact with people because for me, there are definitely some intuitives that I don't really get along with as naturally as I do sensors and vice versa.
Yeah. But
And it's
MBTI would say
all
that's not
yeah.
possible.
And MBTI would be wrong. So
So do you plan to make MBTI content in the future on your own channel, or are you just mostly done with it? Socionics is the
um
wave.
I don't know if I'm even gonna do socionics content on my channel either.
Mm-hmm.
I might on my TikTok, it just depends.
Fair.
But like primarily I wanna do other content that's not even related to Myers-Briggs or Socionics. At least for a while. I want to get back to like my first intention for the channel where I was going to do like short films and like different things. Also like this is kind of a random thing and I know you know this,
Mm-hmm.
Shaun, but like I am in improv and I've met like a lot of people through that and I actually plan on doing some like skits and like series with people in the future that are going to be like more lighthearted lighthearted and comedic. But also I want to do deeper stuff too. I just am in like a spot that I just don't care anymore.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
do care but I don't care. So, and I think that's a good spot to be in.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up your improv, and also, I think you do in-person meetups where you talk typology stuff like socionics? You said
Yeah, we do a meetup called My Type of Shit, which is based off of this podcast.
lovely.
I put it on hold like for the summer, but we were meeting pretty much every week or if not every other week where we are going through and like I was teaching people about socionics and at first we talked about Myers-Briggs and then it's a space that I want to like get people to understand it on a deeper level and there's a lot of people in my community that I think are interested. And then I also do like other meetups. Primarily I have a discussion meetup that's really awesome. I restarted it in 2021 and it's been a really good space. I've met a lot of friends through that one.
Hmm.
So, what about you, Shaun?
For me, um, part of what made me start, well, actually, I have an INTP friend who sent me some socionics videos recently, and there are these sort of underground new age socionics YouTube channels, and I decided to give some of them a listen, and I was very impressed with a lot of the breakdowns that were happening, and I also feel like I haven't seen MBTI content like that in a long time. Um, so I kind of feel like there's still like soul in this socionics community. Um, it reminds me a lot of the early internet, whereas I think MBTI on YouTube now is just I feel like it's a lot of skit stuff and it's a lot of like it's even more watered down than it was before. So I don't
Really?
know if I'm gonna make MBTI content. I don't even know the last time I made a video on it. I also don't even know how good any of my older stuff is. I leave it up, but you know, fair warning. I can't speak for how good any of my stuff is, but I'm looking forward to this podcast, and I think the journey down socionics is going to be very, very interesting. I also think when we did this podcast originally, I wasn't really in the headspace to learn socionics as deeply, and I know you kept trying to drill it down into me that that's what I should be focusing on more, but I think back then I just didn't care as much to learn it or see the value in it, whereas now I'm a little bit older. Like I'm about as old as you were when we did that podcast now, and I think socionics would be a lot more useful these days for me, and also enneagram in general. talking to a girl, and she's telling me a lot about Enneagram and stuff. And there's some Enneagram debates we're gonna get into though, because there's a lot of confusing stuff about Enneagram, and people generally they either know a lot about Enneagram or they just don't use it that much. And I definitely would like us to put Enneagram into our analysis on this podcast going forward. I think it's useful at the very least. I don't think it's really useful on its own, but I do think it has quite a lot of value when you pair it with either MBTI or Socionics.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, and there's quite a few things to touch on with that. But yeah, as far as me making content purely based on MBTI, I mean, in my streams, I'm always typing people, and just I can't really go anywhere without naturally wanting to type people,
Yeah.
right? So as I get better with Socionics, I think that will be even more fun. And now I'm also kind of trying to figure out people's like core Enneagram type and stuff too. Another thing I'd like to touch on this podcast at some point is the dark triad test, which is never really talked about in these communities, which is that's honestly my second favorite. Um, like after MBTI Socionics type stuff, I always analyze dark triad traits in somebody after that. Um, I know there's other stuff like what's the one with the chaotic neutral, lawful evil? What is that stuff?
Oh, like D&D?
Yeah, something like that. There's people who say that's one of their like favorite.
Yeah, the D&D alignments.
Yeah, like there's like some really hardcore fanboys of that general theory. I don't know how deep they take it. Um, Definitely not as deep as Socionics, but there's definitely like a community of people who really like that. Um, that whole like rabbit hole. Although I can't speak for how much can get use out of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more like for fun, that one.
Yeah,
But yeah, in general, there's a lot of like things that we can go over. Like, there's so many tests and so many things. Like, there's even like the Big Five and stuff.
yeah, I like the Big Five
Um,
too. I'm a pretty big fan of it, but I would put it after Dark Triad.
yeah, I'm so interested to see where this goes, and yeah, I'm glad to do this with you
If you
again.
are too, please subscribe, like it up, subscribe on all
Yes.
platforms.
Yeah, depending on what you're listening uh to, I guess. We plan on putting it on like actual podcast platforms this time, which should be better, I would say.
Yeah, and we'll work on the audio quality, get everything right, and all
Yeah.
that stuff. But that's basically it. It's been 4 years
Oh my god, don't even say that.
since we've made content. It has been 4 years. It actually has. Like no joke.
That's crazy. That
We've
is
grown
so
so old.
wild. Oh my gosh.
So it's been 4 years, and we're back. We're older. We're wiser. We have different beliefs and views. We both think our old content sucks. We have fans who like our old content more. We have fans who like our new content more. It basically just doesn't matter. I'm not
Yeah.
ashamed of anything that we made in those older episodes, honestly. I think they were all pretty good,
Well,
given the context. So.
it was good at the time, and
That's something
um
people on the internet have to understand, is things are good for their time. There's a time
yeah.
period. Like the internet rapidly changes. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
what was impressive in 2015 is not what was impressive in 2019. Is not what's impressive now. There's generally different trends, and if you don't have a timeline of like how the internet's changed, you're gonna have a hard time modeling, whether something was good or not. So one thing that was really good for its time was Michael Pierce's videos.
Yeah, Michael Pierce was the GOAT, or
Yeah,
is the GOAT.
yeah, he literally still is. Is he heavily socionics based? Do you think,
I
despite
don't
making
know.
MBTI?
I mean, to be honest, and like you know this, Shaun, I don't watch any MBTI content or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
anything anymore. I had to get away from that scene for a while.
Hmm.
I just don't like. It's just you know, and I don't have anything against anybody, but like I just had to get out of it.
We don't disavow MBTI in here. I mean, that's literally this podcast's origin, and we're
Yeah.
probably gonna go over the cognitive functions and stuff too. But
Well, and most people get into Myers-Briggs first, so it's like
yeah,
you have to kind of respect it. Like, if anything, it's a gateway drug.
yeah, that's a good analogy. But I just think in general the community has changed a lot since those 4 years, like massively.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's pretty much the future of the podcast. Kind of recapping the last 4 years for us, and it's a general outline of what there is going to be going forward. And there'll probably be longer episodes going forward, but it's just going to be me and you for a while, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say.
Okay then. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
I appreciate everybody for listening, and again, I'm so happy to be here with Shaun. Like, we've talked, I mean, we've been like in contact like ever since, but
On and off, yeah.
we've like yeah, we just didn't do it, and now we are, so I'm excited about it.
We are back and better, older and wiser.
Yes.
Anyway, like, subscribe, leave a comment if you liked any of the discussion in this episode, and let us know what you're most excited to hear from us. And until next time.